السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الحمد لله العلي الأعلى الذي خلق فسوى والذي قدر فهدى. أشهد أنه لا إله إلا هو له الأسماء الحسنى وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صاحب المقام المعلى. أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. وقال الرسول يا رب إن قوم اتخذوا هذا القرآن مهجورا. صدق الله العظيم. Honorable scholars, respected brothers, mothers and sisters, Allah in His kindness, in His mercy, in His compassion has blessed us with yet another opportunity to witness the magnificent and the great month of Ramadan. Many Ramadans have come and gone. Depending on the life that Allah has willed and decreed for us, perhaps many more will come and go. The question we have to ask ourselves is that what do we achieve from the month of Ramadan? Most of us, bi'idhnillah, we achieve great reward. We fast, we perform tarawih salah, we read Quran, we give charity, we make dhikr, we make dua, we sit for i'tikaf. And those are all noble, virtuous, meritorious actions which has and will, inshallah, yield great rewards. But there's a difference between the reward of Ramadan and the benefit of Ramadan. These are two very different and two very distinct things. The reward of Ramadan is, as I've just explained, you do certain good actions and Allah grants you reward. The benefit of Ramadan is dependent on your condition and your state after the month of Ramadan. Most of us, may Allah forgive us, after Ramadan, mentally, emotionally, physically and spiritually, we return to exactly where we were prior to the month of Ramadan. We secure the reward of the great month, and it's a phenomenal reward, but we don't secure the benefit of the month. Every Ramadan is meant to bring us closer to Allah and to keep us closer to Allah. Some scholars explain that imagine a step ladder. Every step you take, it takes you higher to the top. So Ramadan is like that. Every Ramadan ought to be taking us higher and closer to Allah. The problem is we take a step up or two steps up and then we retrogress. And the reason is we never had an intention prior to Ramadan for change. We had an intention for ibadah and worship, but not an intention for change. And Allah says, "Ana inda dhanni abdi bi." I treat you as per your expectations of me, as per your intention. So your intention was to fast, to read Quran, to perform tarawih, to discharge your zakah, to give optional charity, to make dhikr, to sit for i'tikaf. And those are all wonderful niyat and intentions. You did it, Allah accept, you secured the great reward. But when it comes to becoming better servants of Allah, when it comes to becoming better Muslims, when it comes to improving ourselves spiritually, we never had an intention. We only put a pause on our bad habits. We did not press the delete button. And this is the Ramadan wherein we can change that. Even now, it's not too late to make an intention that, oh Allah, this Ramadan, I want to become a better servant of yours. I want to become a better Muslim. I want to enhance my levels of taqwa, which fasting will facilitate, but then I want to sustain it after the month of Ramadan. Ramadan is about quantity and quality. Post-Ramadan is primarily about quality. You can't sustain the quantity. You can't read as much Quran. Very few, if anyone, can read 20 rakats of optional prayer every night, throughout the night. We're not going to be able to fast every month, 30 days consecutively. That's not what is expected of us anyway. What is expected of us is to be constant and consistent in each one of these actions of ibadah and worship that we have carried out during the month of Ramadan. So you can't fast 30 days a month, fast 3 days, fast Monday and Thursday, fast, some fast. You can't read as many juz of the Quran, read some Quran every day. Make some dhikr every day. Connect with Allah via dua and supplication every day. So now that we understand that fundamental point, which can make a great difference, every Ramadan we say, oh Allah, make this the best Ramadan of my life. But how? We don't have the intention, nor do we have the action. Allah has created this world such, you need to have the intention, you need to make some effort, there needs to be some action from your side, then Allah reciprocates. Then Allah puts barakah and blessings. Then Allah doesn't only meet you halfway, you come crawling to Allah, Allah comes running to you. So, how do we do this now? How do we ensure that this Ramadan is different? That we become better servants of Allah? That we become the best version of ourselves as Muslims? That we reach Allah? That we reach Allah? And that we become closer to Allah? So the scholars explain and tell us there are various ways through which you can reach Allah. And that's the beauty of Islam. Allah has not restricted it to one way. Allah has put before us multiple options which we can exercise simultaneously in our endeavor and in our effort to reach Allah Ta'ala. As an example, in a hadith al-Qudsi it is mentioned, وَجَبَتْ مَحَبَّتِي لِلْمُتَحَابِّينَ فِيَّ. Allah says, if two people love one another only for my pleasure, no ulterior motive, they love one another, they spend time with one another, they help with one another, they assist one another only for the pleasure of Allah, then Allah says, my love becomes compulsory for both of them. And when Allah loves you, you've reached Allah, you've secured that closeness and that relationship with Allah Ta'ala. So that's one way. But being the humans that we are, when we want to achieve something, we're looking for the easiest yet the most effective way. So I flew in yesterday from Johannesburg. When I had to book my ticket, what do I look for? Cheapest, quickest, easiest. The quickest amount of time, the least amount of money, and the shortest transit if there has to be one. That's human nature. Allah has created us such. So there is a plethora of ways through which you can reach Allah, and each person can secure his ticket to Jannah in a different way. That's why Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said, don't look at any action as insignificant. And don't look at any man's contribution as not being meaningful. One man's Jannah will be his generosity. Another man's Jannah will be his hospitality. A third man's Jannah could be his ibadah and worship. A fourth man's Jannah could be his assistance in time of need to the person who required his assistance. Allah leaves all the options open. Allah has made it easy for us. But what's the most quickest, the easiest and the most effective? In the words of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, the Nabi of Allah says, إِنَّكُمْ لَا تَرْجِعُونَ إِلَى اللَّهِ بِشَيْءٍ أَفْضَلَ مِمَّا خَرَجَ مِنْهُ يعني القرآن. Nothing can bring you closer to Allah more quickly and more effectively than the Quran, because the Quran is the spoken word of Allah. By virtue of that quality, that it's the spoken word of Allah, when you establish a constant and a holistic relationship, two operative words, a constant and a holistic relationship with the Quran, then you've set yourself on the path which is the easiest, the quickest and the most effective in terms of reaching Allah. I don't need to elaborate in terms of the connection between Ramadan and the Quran. The Quran itself says very emphatically, شهر رمضان الذي أنزل فيه القرآن. When Isa alayhi salam received revelation, he was fasting. When Musa alayhi salam received revelation, he was fasting. When Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam received the first revelation in the cave of Hira, he was fasting. So it's a topic on its own, but the basics are quite manifest and clear that there is a very strong connection between fasting and the Quran. There is a very strong connection between Ramadan and the Quran. So the Quran has that power, it has that magic. You see today, if there's going to be a talk and there's going to be a speaker, we look at the title, we look at the topic. If it's something fancy, something catchy, something we haven't heard before, something that causes intrigue, something that raises a question, then we're more interested. If someone says, I'm going to speak on Salah, I'm going to speak on Quran, I'm going to speak on Dhikr, we feel, okay, yeah, it's important, but we kind of know, it's nothing new. Let me tell you about a lesson that history teaches us. The more you progress on certain fronts, inevitably the more you will retrogress on other fronts. Because this world is not a perfect place. So even materially, during the COVID period, Zoom became very prominent. A few weeks ago, we set up a meeting with the brother at the radio station where I am employed, Radio Islam in South Africa. and it was supposed to be a Zoom meeting. And he insisted, no, I want to come in physically. And we were a bit taken aback that, why would you want to take the hassle? He lives a good 40, 50 kilometers away, and he's got to negotiate traffic, and he's got to spend some money on fuel, time, come all the way when we could have done this on Zoom. So anyway, he insisted, we obliged. He was coming to us. We were not going to him. So there was no hassle on our side. When he came for the meeting, we kind of, in a very diplomatic way asked him, was there a reason that you insisted on a physical meeting and not a Zoom meeting? So he said, you see, Zoom definitely has its advantages. When you're pressed for time, when you've got to do something with short notice, then it's a good tool. But as much as we have progressed in that way, we have retrogressed where we're losing the human touch. We don't take meetings and commitments in meetings as seriously when they take place on Zoom as when they take place physically. And he said, every now and again, I insist upon myself to make a meeting physical, just to keep that human touch between me and my clients. So even in the material world, in the corporate world, they have understood. In the corporate world today, if you study what Robin Sharma is writing, on Stephen Covey, these life coaches, I always say, on a lighter note, there's two things in life that you can become without requiring any qualification. The one is a political analyst and the other is a life coach. Anybody with a mouth and an opinion can be a political analyst. And anyone with some flowery language that can make you feel nice, albeit for a few seconds, is a life coach. Now, I'm not undermining those who are serious political analysts and who can give you some very enlightening perspective on the issues of the day, nor am I diminishing the work of those who are proper life coaches. I would think every alim is a life coach, every imam is a life coach, but what is the definition? But whatever the definition may or may not be, there are people who are doing good work with the title. And then there are others who just claim the title because you don't require any qualification. So some of these people write books and they deliver seminars and they charge you top dollar. But when you study their books, which we do, just to give context to the teachings of Islam which are eternal, you will see that they are also making a call to come back to basics. Because as the material world and the technological world has progressed, on the innovative front, we have lost connection on the fundamental front. And this same principle applies Islamically. So if we look at our grandparents, they couldn't read Quran the way our youngsters do. MashaAllah, today you go into almost any hifz class. You come into any musalla, any masjid, the tajweed is in order. The recitation is beautiful, good voice, good tune, good style. Whereas maybe the first generation of Muslims that came to this country, like in our country, well, I'm already 5th generation in South Africa, my kids are 6th generation. But growing up, I can still feel the echo in my ears of my Nana reading Quran. Now that I know, after having studied, the tajweed was poor. The tajweed was poor. But I can tell you, both my sons are hafiz. Their tajweed is perhaps better than mine. But my Nana had a greater passion for the Quran than they have. You see, they didn't have as much knowledge or as many scholars or as easy access to knowledge as we have today. Today, the average Muslim who's not even qualified has much more knowledge than the average Muslim of previous generations because of access to scholars and access to material. I can give a talk here today and people can be listening to me anywhere in the world. A recording of this talk can reach, any part of the world within seconds. Whereas in those days, I can remember, and I'm not all that old, but when a scholar would come, and it used to be mostly Urdu-speaking scholars from the subcontinent coming to the Indian communities in South Africa, it was a major event. It was a major event. People would clear their diaries, they would clear their schedules. They say, we're going to listen to the waz. That's how they used to pronounce it those days. And they would travel from different towns to come to a particular central location to listen to this discussion. But they had greater passion. They had greater enthusiasm. So they may have, read very slowly, perhaps incorrectly, but they read every day. And today's average hafiz rarely touches the Quran between Ramadan and the next. His stress is only during the month of Ramadan. So that's why it's important for us to talk about these basics. We do from time to time talk about contemporary issues, new issues, issues pertaining, the community and the world that we live in today. But ever so often, and especially on occasions like this in Ramadan, we've got to go back to the basics and see how we strengthen our relationship and our connection with the basics, because the basics are the basics for a reason. The foundation is the foundation for a reason. In any building, you can embellish. You can see, how can I paint again? How can I put new fixtures, fittings, trimmings? But that foundation has to remain solid. So we've progressed on many fronts, but we've retrogressed on other fronts. So, I mentioned two operative words: having a holistic and a constant relationship with the Quran. Constant is simple to understand, that post-Ramadan, the Quran must be part of our daily routine. You may not be able to read or listen to as much as you were during Ramadan, but it must be part of your daily routine. Now, what's holistic? Why I say holistic is because our relationship with the Quran is pretty much one-dimensional, and that is recitation of the Quran. Recitation of the Quran is powerful, it's important. Even if you don't understand its meaning. Sometimes people say, why should I read the Quran if I don't know Arabic? Understand it this way: your body needs nourishment, right? So the ideal state is that you must eat whilst you are awake, and you know what you're eating, and you can get the enjoyment on your palate of all the spices and the sauces and the flavors which your wife so painstakingly put into that dish, into that meal. So your body gets nourishment and you get enjoyment, and you know that I've consumed the meal and I've enjoyed the meal. However, if you are in a coma, what do? Or if you're ill, you can't ingest anything. Whatever you're ingesting is coming out. They feed you through a tube. Now, you don't get the taste, you don't get the satisfaction of having consumed, biryani or whatever else it is that you enjoy, but your body gets the benefit of nourishment nonetheless. For those of us who are trying to diet ever so often, trying and failing, but continuing to try. Nowadays, you get any kind of product on the market, it's powder. They say it's a meal replacement. So you just take it and you put a couple of spoons of that powder into a cup of water, and you've got an entire meal. It's not going to taste like biryani. No, it's going to taste like chicken tikka. But they say, and they are the experts, that it has not even the same, but better nutritional value for your system. So the ideal is you must nourish your body, but at the same time enjoy and understand what the nourishment is about by tasting it on your palate. However, in the absence of the ideal, you still need nourishment. So even if you are comatose, even if you are in a coma, they will still feed you through a drip. They will still feed you in a manner which will sustain your body. The ideal is for us to understand the Quran and the message of the Quran. But even if we don't, like the body needs nourishment, the soul also needs nourishment. Like the body needs nourishment, the soul also needs nourishment. So even if you don't understand, and it's not an excuse for you not to understand, I'm coming to that. But even if you don't understand, you've got to be constant in your recitation of the Quran, because that's nourishment for your soul. Today, research has been done that why are people so unhappy, even though they have all the physical amenities that they could ever desire? And one of the reasons is this, that physically we are overnourished and spiritually we are malnourished. And that creates an internal imbalance. And that's why so many people feel hollow and empty and lack contentment and satisfaction. Although they themselves will say, I have everything in life. I have everything in life, I just don't understand. Your physical, and man is made of ruh and jasad, the body and the soul. The soul is more important. It pre-existed the body and it will exist post the body. Death does not mean death to the soul. Death means separation of the soul from the body, which results in the death of the body. The soul continues with its journey into the realm of barzakh. So we're nourishing the body more than what is required, but we're not nourishing the soul even to an adequate level. And that creates the imbalance. So the first part, and I'm going to share with you 7 things that will make up having a holistic relationship with the Quran. So the first is reciting the Quran, and for every letter we know we get 10 rewards. And Alif Lam Mim, Alif is an independent, and Lam is independent, we know. So we should at least have this enthusiasm and read the Quran with a degree of relish. The second is to listen to recitation of the Quran. Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam told Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiyallahu anhu that recite, and he said, Ya Rasulullah, why should I recite when the Quran has been revealed upon you? The Nabi of Allah said, sometimes it's good to listen to the recitation of others. Whoever your favorite scholar is, and technology has made it so easy. But take out time and focus and concentrate and listen to the recitation of the Quran. Reading the Quran has its benefit and effect. Listening to the Quran has its benefit and effect. The third aspect is improve your own recitation of the Quran. Tajweed, what we normally refer to it as. You see, sometimes we think, well, Tajweed is for the Huffaz and for the ulama, those who are going to be leading people in congregation, those who are the experts. No, Tajweed is for every one of us. Because the Quran has a particular standard which we all have to uphold. Having a beautiful voice or having a tune, that is something else. But pronouncing the letters properly, even if you're old and you've now become accustomed to pronouncing in a particular way, that's no excuse. That's no excuse. We take pride in everything else. We take pride in the way we dress. We take pride in how we serve our guests. We should take pride in how we read the Kalam of Allah. And there are enough in terms of ulama and scholars and huffaz who will be there to assist us with no cost. It will take a while. Sometimes when something is established on your tongue, it takes a while to rectify it and to remedy it and to improve it. But we should make that effort, because one day we have to stand in front of Allah and we will have to present that which we recited from the Kalam of Allah. So that's the third. The fourth is memorization of the Quran. Again, we have a misconception where we think memorization of the Quran is only for those young boys or girls who are going to do hifz or at the age. Recently I spoke to a brother who was in his 60s. He completed his hifz at the hands of his own son. He had started when he was young, but he was playful, he got distracted, he didn't finish. And his mother always used to tell him, but your father wanted you to become a hafid, your father wanted you to become a hafid. And when he entered into his 60s, semi-retired, the son was running the business. He said, well, what do I do with my time now that I don't have to be at the business every day all the time? And he said, well, let me start. And over a period of 2 or 3 years, he concluded and he completed his hifz. I know of people even more advanced in age, in their 70s or 80s. In the ahadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we are taught that if you start the process of memorizing the Quran and you don't complete it before your death, the angels will complete it for you in the qabr. So each one of us, irrespective of age or the strength of our memory or the time that we have available, we are potential huffaz. Now sometimes you tell this, a person will say, yeah, no, okay, but you know what, my son is hafid, my grandson is hafid. Inshallah, he'll take me to Jannah. So I said once to one Baji, I said, Baji, why are you not living with your son? He said, no, I like to be independent. I like to be independent. So I say, in the dunya you want to be independent, but in akhirat you want to be dependent on your son being a hafid. Why don't you become a hafid for yourself? In material things you want your own honor. You want your own distinction. So in spiritual things, even if every son of yours and every daughter of yours and every grandkid of yours are hafid, why not become a hafid yourself? Even if you're female or male, irrespective, every one of us should have that desire that let me learn from the Quran. Start with the famous surahs, the daily surahs. Start with one line a day. Start. Either Allah will make you complete in this world or Allah will make you complete in the after. That's the fourth thing. So reading the Quran, listening to recitation of the Quran, improving the recitation of the Quran, memorizing the Quran. The fifth is connecting with the meaning of the Quran. Again, we have a misconception that the meaning of the Quran is the exclusive domain of the scholars. No. The interpretation of the Quran is the exclusive domain of the scholars, because it's a science. So you want to interpret Quran, you want to deduce rulings from the Quran, you must go and study and you must become proficient in the necessary sciences. But the basic message of the Quran, this is Allah's love letter to humanity. It's a travesty. It's a tragedy that we live an entire life reading the Quran, loving the Quran, listening to the Quran, but not connecting with the meaning of the Quran. And today the ulama have made it easy for us, easy to understand contemporary English. We find tafsir of the Quran. Previously, it was that Shakespearean English which gave you a headache after you read a few lines in English. Now easy to understand. Every home should have at least one full set of the tafsir and the commentary of the Quran. And every member of the family should be reading. And we read Surah Fatiha. Why can't we learn more about the meaning of it? We read Surah Ikhlas, the surahs that are recited in Salah. Every day, go through an abridged summary of what is going to be recited in the juz. And every day of our lives, just read a little bit, or sit in a tafsir lesson, or in a tafsir halaqa, and connect with the meaning of the Quran. Thereafter, the injunctions of the Quran, that's the sixth then. Practice upon the teachings of the Quran. When Aisha radiallahu anha was asked, that tell us about the character of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. She said, "Kana khuluquhu al-Quran." His character was the Quran. Meaning, when you saw him speak, when you witnessed his actions, when you observed him in his mannerisms, you saw all of the teachings of the Quran radiating in the actions of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The Quran is not to adorn our shelves. The Quran is to adorn our tongues, our hearts, and our actions. And the seventh of the 7 parts that make up a holistic relationship with the Quran is for us to propagate the message of the Quran. What stops us from teaching our children, our grandchildren, the basic commands of Allah, the basic surahs? I was saying to some brothers the other day, think about it, a perpetual investment. You teach your kid how to read Surah Fatiha. For as long as they live, you get the equivalent reward. They will then teach their kid, who will teach their kid. For generations to come, up to the day of Qiyamah possibly, you would be long gone from this world. People would have forgotten that you existed. There will be bones left in your grave, but the angels will continue to be writing reward because you taught one child Surah Fatiha. That's the power of the Quran. I don't want to take up too much of your time, brothers and sisters. Like I said, my message is simple but profound. Allah makes it easier in Ramadan because Ramadan is the month of the Quran. Even the laziest of us read some Quran during the month of Ramadan. I was saying the other day, I was addressing some students. On a lighter note, I said that the teacher said to one student, "You're very lazy." He said, "No, sir. I'm not lazy. I'm highly motivated to do nothing." I'm not lazy. I'm highly motivated to do nothing. So, even those who are highly motivated to do nothing, they become somewhat motivated to do something in the month of Ramadan. So, whilst we have the opportunity, let's make the niyyah and let's start building the relationship with the Quran. And most critical will be the first few days after Eid. Even if it's one page, be constant. Just be constant. Be constant. They say, and I'll conclude, I'll just share with you one quote and one incident. They say the Quran is such a book that no matter where you read it, the author is always present. The Quran is such a book that no matter where you read it, the author is always present. Any other book, the author may be alive, he may be dead. He may know you, he may not know you. He may care for you, he may not care damn. But the Quran is such a book that no matter where you read it, the author is always present. And the Quran is such a book that no matter who you are, the author loves you. No matter who you are, Allah loves you. When you read the Quran, when you connect with the Quran, when you have a holistic relationship with the Quran, when you have a sustained relationship with the Quran, it's a sign that you love Allah and that Allah loves you. Because Uthman radiallahu anh said, if you want to know what is your position in the sight of Allah, check the status of your relationship with the Kalam of Allah. You see, none of us can send a WhatsApp to Allah and say, "Oh Allah, am I in good books or not?" There are other ways through which you've got to figure this out. And Uthman radiallahu anh says, one way is to see what is the state of your own relationship with the Kalam of Allah. There are many stories and incidents. Time does not permit for us to go into it, but the crux of the message is, life is passing us by. If these last 2 or 3 years hasn't given us a wake-up call, then I don't know what will. I mean, who would have thought, who would have imagined that life would literally come to a standstill? A billionaire with a private jet could not fly anywhere. The man who loved his wife the most was fearful that he would catch a virus from her. A microscopic virus brought the world to its knees with all of our technology and all of our scientific advancement. We saw something that we never imagined we could have seen. So if that is not a wake-up call about the very finicky and the very fragile and the very limited nature of life, then what wake-up call do we require? Every second that passes is a second that's passing away in our lives. Every second that passes is a second that's bringing us closer to our grave. Every second that passes is a second that's bringing us closer to standing before Allah and having to account. And there's only one bite at the cherry of life. No second chance. No second chance. When you ask Allah for a second chance on the day of Qiyamah, Allah will say, "Tell me what you did with the first opportunity that I gave you." How many Ramadans have come and gone? May Allah accept our feeble efforts. May Allah forgive our deficiencies. But we've got to start getting serious about life. We've got to start getting serious about preparing for our hereafter, about becoming better servants of Allah, about not just worshipping during Ramadan, but worshipping in Ramadan in a way that we become better worshippers for the rest of our lives. And this is a starting point. Develop a constant and a holistic relationship with the Quran. I'll conclude with one incident. And I quote this incident every time I talk about the Quran. It's a famous incident, every one of us is aware of it, but it's the lesson behind it that needs to resonate. It's the incident of Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anhu. There was a time in Makkah where the two greatest enemies of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam were Abu Jahl and Umar. Umar's heart was so filled with hatred and animosity towards Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam that he sets out one day with this very firm intention of killing the Nabi of Allah. Now just think about it for a moment. Had he succeeded, he would have committed the greatest murder that humanity had ever witnessed. He would have spilled the most precious blood that Allah has ever created. And en route, he divulges his motivation to someone who tells him, before you go to Dar al-Arqam, and that is where Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam was, first pass by your own house, see what your sister and brother-in-law are up to. And when he comes there, he sees that they have accepted Islam and they are studying the Quran. And he flies into a fit of rage. Such a rage that he beats his own sister until she starts to bleed. And upon the sight of the blood, does he become embarrassed. And he comes down. But something happened. Even in that rage, something happened. When he came to the house, he obviously came discreetly to spy on his sister and brother-in-law. And he heard the following words of the Quran. طه ما أنزلنا عليك القرآن لتشقى إلا تذكرة لمن يخشى تنزيلا ممن خلق الأرض والسماوات العلى الرحمن على العرش استوى له ما في السماوات وما في الأرض وما بينهما وما تحت الثرى وإن تجهر بالقول فإنه يعلم السر وأخفى الله لا إله إلا هو له الأسماء الحسنى. These words of the Quran melted the heart of Umar, which was so hard that he wanted to kill the Nabi of Allah. By the time he reaches Dar al-Arqam and he knocks on the door, and there's an inquiry from inside, a very anxious one, because they knew who it was. That what brings you here, O Umar? He says, I've come to proclaim the Shahada. When the Nabi of Allah hears this, the Nabi of Allah shouts out the takbir, Allahu Akbar. Umar has accepted Islam. When Umar accepts Islam, the Sahaba can make tawaf in public. When Umar accepts Islam, the Sahaba can perform salah in public. That Umar who wanted to kill the Nabi of Allah, his ears fell upon the recitation of the Quran, even though he was in a fit of rage. But the magic of the Quran was such, it turned his heart from the man who wanted to kill the Nabi of Allah to the man who lies resting next to the Nabi of Allah. When you go for Umrah, you say, Assalamu alayka ya Rasulullah, Assalamu alayka ya Abu Bakr, Assalamu alayka ya Umar. The Umar who wanted to kill the Nabi of Allah will be resurrected with the Nabi of Allah. The Umar who wanted to kill the Nabi of Allah will be the eternal neighbor of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam in Jannatul Firdaus. The magic of the Quran. Give the Quran a chance in your life. One disciple went to his spiritual mentor and said, I commit so many sins, I don't know where to start. He said, start by bringing the Quran into your home. Read the Quran, listen to the Quran, study the Quran. Through the barakah of the Quran, Allah will detach you from all these sins that you are involved in. So give the Quran an opportunity post Ramadan. Make that intention now, make that effort now. Bring the Quran into your home and see the barakah in your marriage. See the barakah in your children. Bring the Quran into your business, see the barakah in your profits. Bring the Quran into your life, see the change in your own life. Bring the Quran into your congregation and communities and then see the prosperity. But let the Quran work its magic. Just open the door for it. May Allah grant all of us the tawfiq. Sallallahu wa sallam wa barak ala nabiyyina Muhammad. Allahumma anta salam wa minka salam tabarakta wa ta'alayta ya dhal jalali wal ikram. Allahumma a'inna ala dhikrika wa shukrika wa husna ibadatik. Rabbana atina fid dunya hasanah wa fil akhirati hasanah wa qina adhaban nar. Rabbana ظلمنا أنفسنا وإن لم تغفر لنا وترحمنا لنكونن من الخاسرين. ربنا اغفر لنا ولإخواننا الذين سبقونا بالإيمان ولا تجعل في قلوبنا غلا للذين آمنوا ربنا إنك رؤوف رحيم. اللهم اجعلنا من أهل القرآن الذين هم أهلك وخاصتك يا أرحم الراحمين. اللهم تقبل منا صيامنا وقيامنا وركوعنا وسجودنا وتلاوتنا وأذكارنا. اللهم بارك لنا في رمضان، اللهم بارك لنا في رمضان. اللهم إنا نسألك من كل خير ما سألك منه نبيك وحبيبك محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم، ونعوذ بك من كل شر ما استعاذك منه نبيك وحبيبك محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم. أنت المستعان وعليك البلاغ. سبحان ربنا رب العزة عما يصفون، وسلام على المرسلين، وآخر دعوانا.